Now, depending on whether you listen to the US government or the European Union, the stated all-electric range of this application is somewhere between 30 and 40 miles. So in reality, this whole mousetrap is designed for getting around congestion charging zones in Europe. And that's where I feel there's a big question here. It dawned on me recently that you and I have not driven a Cayenne in a very long time. And in exactly that same time, there has been a new flavor that's been introduced. Not really a flavor, it's more of a trim, a Platinum. So let's understand what a Platinum is and do so on one of the more interesting versions of Cayennes, the plug-in hybrid, the one with the 3-liter single turbo engine. 5,164 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,342 kilograms with that Sport Plus mode. Oh, yeah, that goes. Oh, now this is not a PDK. That was a very, very not so gentle reminder that there's a torque converter in this Tiptronic, so it does change the way it delivers power. This is still quick, and just kind of a quick recap here. It's 455 horsepower and 516 pounds of torque, and yes, that's based on that single turbo 3-liter V6. That's 335 horsepower and 332 pounds of torque. But the fuel economy, it's actually not as good in the plug-in hybrid. It's 1 mpg less, so it's 18, 22, 20 combined. So really this is about performance, not really about fuel economy. And you notice the difference. Like if one were to drive a basic Cayenne, it's sprightly. I wouldn't call it quick. This is downright quick. It's just not as supple as the way it delivers power in the 2.9S. That probably the sweet spot in the Cayenne world. Now, a huge point to understand about the whole plug-in hybrid solution. Yeah, it's lovely in today's infrastructure, but in this case, in the case of a Cayenne, it is 600 pounds heavier than the Cayenne with the same gas engine without the second propulsion system. Then there's the way the car drives. It's set up exactly the same as other Cayennes you and I have driven. You can go back and check out all those other episodes because we've literally driven almost every flavor of Cayenne on the market, including the Cayenne GT. But this, it's more about value. This does offer more stuff, makes it a little bit better value. Like for example, some of the trim on the outside, it's satin platinum, hence the name. Or notice the chalk seat belts, the Bose stereo system, the LED headlamps. Then there are the seats. It's the 18-way seats that are fitted as standard here, as opposed to the basic Porsche seats. Now those bits are all lovely, but there are two that really make the whole package stand out. Number one, the panoramic roof is fitted as standard, and number two, the 21-inch Spider RS design wheels are fitted as standard as well. And notice they have that satin platinum finish to go with the whole theme of the Platinum Edition. Put all that together, it makes it a more well-rounded package. What is a base Cayenne? It's somewhere in the 70s. This one is $92,700 in basic price. Now the obvious question is, well, how much is a GTS with the more powerful engine and even more equipment? Well, that's quite a big jump. It's $15,000 more than this. So it comes down to, does one need a very fast V8 or is one okay with the plug-in hybrid? And that's where we switch to the EV mode here. In reality, okay, now we're in EV mode. So this is all electric, running on sunshine here. Now keep in mind, I can't really push it as aggressively because when one pushes the pedal all the way to the floor, that engages the gas engine. So what I've been doing is driving this thing around town, mainly in the EV mode. Now, depending on whether you listen to the US government or the European Union, the stated all-electric range of this application is somewhere between 30 and 40 miles. Now, I've plugged this thing into the hanger on a 240, charged it to 100%, took about 3 hours, and it stated 29 miles of range. I drove it around town, and I got probably 20 miles of range. So in reality, This whole mousetrap is designed for getting around congestion charging zones in Europe. And that's where I feel there's a big question here, because this is a great solution for someone who wants to commute and really doesn't need the GTS. It has all the fancy bits like the GTS package, like for example, the contrasting seatbelts, magnificent. Now there is the question of the color. It's available in white or black, and then 5 different metallic colors, this being the Carrera white at $800. I wouldn't pay extra for this. I would argue it needs like a darker blue or maybe a red to make those satin finish wheels really pop out. But back to really what this is, and is it good at its intended application? I would argue it's something that's intending to be fancier in the Cayenne world and does a good job at that. I would even go so far as to saying, as a daily driver, something I would put my kids in to go to and from school, which is what most of these things are going to do. I think the plug-in hybrid solution is the better solution over the turbo. The only one that would want the turbo is if you're doing things like this, or if you live out in the country and you have unique roads. Other than that, this is fast enough, which brings us to the wish list here. I would want this to have more range. I know you're not surprised in me saying this to you, but such a good solution in today's infrastructure. If I could get 50 miles of range, 75, I know I'm asking for a lot, 100, that would transform the usability of this vehicle. One can use it all day, probably multiple days if you've got 100 miles of range. I mean a real 100 miles of range. Not this thing where it says it's 30, I only got 20 miles of range. But something that could be used around town on EV and then drive between city to city on gas engine and still get pretty good fuel economy. Because what I'm getting, even when I'm taking into account all of my gas driving, I'm doing high 20s, even though the US EPA is saying I should get somewhere between 22 and 23 at best. So that brings us to an important point of the wish list here. That would cost money, right? To put a bigger battery, make it a longer range plug-in hybrid. The reality is, the one you're looking at here is over 100 grand. Something tells me there's enough research and development budget, really enough play in the price of the car and the kind of people that buy these things, where you could have the plug-in hybrid with 50, 75, or 100 miles of range, and it really wouldn't change the price of this vehicle all that much, but keeping this whole platinum package. But this is one man's opinion, and the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all word, MotoManTV all word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you sharing it with all your friends on your socials.